What if I told you the disasters that we just witnessed last month? What if I told you they weren't random? That they were actually sending us a message? Right off, right off. I want you to drop me a thumbs up in the comments if you notice these patterns too. I want to know if you're seeing what I'm seeing. Because here's the thing, guys. In the span of just 1 month, we saw five major high profile disasters, one after the other. We saw a mass casualty attack in New Orleans, the Tesla cyber truck explosion in Vegas, the wildfires, one of the worst in history, largest and worst, a midair collision over Washington, D.C., a medical jet crash in Philadelphia just 2 days later, all in January of 2025. Is this a coincidence or is it something deeper? Let's break this down because what we're seeing here, guys, this is not normal. Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Last month felt surreal, didn't it? One major disaster after another, too big, too frequent, and as far as I'm concerned, too connected. I mean, sure, tragic events happen all the time, but they usually happen in isolation. This was a cascade, it was a pattern. And when patterns emerge, we have to ask, are we witnessing something random, a random chain of events, or is there something bigger at play, something trying to get our attention? Because here's where it gets even weirder to me. I want to know what you think. Each of these events carry the same eerie themes of fire and explosions and destruction, sudden impact, almost like a message being spelled out in real time. Now, if you follow metaphysics, astrology maybe, or even the deeper layers of reality, you know that nothing happens in isolation. Events like these, especially when they cluster together, they carry meaning. When I just had Daryl Anka, the channel for Bashar, on the show last month, I asked him directly, was there a deeper metaphysical significance behind, at the time we were just talking about the LA wildfires? I wanted to know, were these events, from his perspective, part of a bigger shift? Let's listen to what he had to say.
I'm sure there are many different ways that experiences like this can be interpreted. Certainly, one of them that's very pragmatic is the idea that this, in many ways, is the result of climate change and what's going on with the changes on the earth in terms of people facing things and being responsible for their connection to nature, making sure that, we don't do things to the planet that would create more uh, likelihood of these kinds of experiences happening. This area has been very dry for a long time. It's getting hotter and hotter here. The people that say, oh, climate change isn't real should come and live in the San Fernando Valley for a while, because they can really see over a period of many, many years, living in LA since I was a young child, I can certainly see the shifting weather patterns that have happened in this city and around the world. But primarily, again, what I've experienced is that, things are getting warmer, lasting longer in that sense. And a lot of this is simply due to the acceleration that humanity is creating in a natural cycle. But I don't think we would have necessarily been experiencing these kinds of changes for quite some time if humanity hadn't accelerated it with, the effects of our technology. So, when you live in a place where you remember things like summer thunderstorms that don't exist anymore, when
Mm.
you remember that a hot summer day may have been in the 90s, and now literally 2 miles from me a couple of years ago we reached 121 degrees, which is bizarre. So, we are seeing slowly things change that are making conditions for fires more conducive in our area. And we're seeing things change in other areas of the planet that exacerbate other weather conditions like the hurricanes and
Mhm.
tornadoes and things like that, that other people are struggling through. So, we need to pay attention to our relationship to nature and understand that we're all connected and all part of it, and really look for ways to improve our relationship with it and take better care of what's going on the planet and look at it as a whole system.
Now, While I agree that our connection with nature is absolutely critical, this response, the response that he gave, as far as I'm concerned, only scratched the surface of what's really going on here. Because look, when you take a step back, when you connect the dots, I love doing my dot connecting exercises. When you look at these disasters as a collective message, you start to see this pattern emerging. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it, as they say, right? Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. So far, we've covered just a few eerie connections, but I have to ask you again, are these just coincidences or something bigger happening? I want you to type it. Tell me right now, not random. Type not random in the comments if you're seeing the patterns. I want to know what you think because here's where things get even more surreal. The LA wildfires and Kobe Bryant's helicopter crash, both linked to fire and destruction in Calabasas, California, albeit 5 years apart, the DC midair collision and Kobe's helicopter crash. How am I bringing that up or why am I bringing that up? Well, both helicopters are linked to Sikorsky aircraft. Kobe's helicopter was a Sikorsky S-76B, I believe, B. And the Black Hawk involved in the midair collision was manufactured by Sikorsky. Parents and children were central to multiple tragedies, from Kobe's crash to the figure skaters lost in DC, to the medevac flight that went down in Philadelphia also. If you don't know, it was the, I believe, female patient and her mother that were being medevaced either from Philadelphia or, well, into Philadelphia ultimately. So were youth sports connected? So we've got explosions, fire, impact over and over again. And here's another eerie connection. Just days before the 2025 disasters unfolded, CNN began promoting an upcoming documentary on Kobe Bryant's life and his tragic death. The documentary is called The Making of a Legend. I haven't seen it yet, but I think I'd like to, if I can, go back and watch it. And I remember this was being heavily promoted by CNN right as serendipity would have it. The wildfires were burning through major areas of LA, including Calabasas, the same area where Kobe's helicopter crashed. I'd say kind of strange, right? So why am I mentioning the Kobe Bryant tragedy in the context of this past month's series of events? Because less than 8 weeks, I'm going to tell you, less than 8 weeks after Kobe's helicopter went down in 2020, you know what happened? The world descended into utter chaos and a literal lockdown with the, I'm going to call it so-called pandemic, a serious crisis by, all estimates. No one could have foreseen it, right? Or could we? Or could we? Look, certainly I'm not trying to conjure or even suggest that these events that we just witnessed this past January may be trying to tell us that another major crisis of that magnitude is around the corner. But you have to admit, it's almost like the universe is screaming at us to pay attention. And this brings me to something even more mind-blowing. What if reality itself is not as fixed as we think? Because some researchers, especially in the fields like quantum physics and metaphysics, that which I'm a part of, suggest that we may be able to change the course of events. But get this, even events that have already happened. Now, unbelievable as this might sound, I think it's worth exploring. What if we could alter the past from the present? Have you ever heard of the concept referred to as retrocausality? Retrocausality. It's a term that I've used in a few conversations that I've had actually in a couple of panels I was on. It came up. Um, as an example, researchers like Dean Radin, physicist Dean Radin, I'm sure a name you might know, have actually conducted multiple experiments showing that future events can perhaps send ripples backward in time. So essentially, Radin and others have gathered experimental evidence to show that the past can possibly be altered at the present or point of the present, I should say. Lynn McTaggart, someone else, in her well-known intention experiments, even found evidence that focused intention can alter past outcomes or, at a minimum, their effects. And that's a very important distinction. And then here's something else that came to mind as I was kind of going through this sort of thought process. It's something called the grandfather paradox. Have you ever heard of that? It's fascinating. I'm going to give you the real truncated version. It goes like this. Imagine someone travels back in time and prevents their grandfather from ever meeting their grandmother. I'll say it again. Imagine someone travels back in time and prevents their grandfather from ever meeting their grandmother. Now, if that were to happen, the time traveler that went back in time is never born. But if they were never born, how did they go back in time in the first place? So, this is a very famous paradox, and it points to the idea that past events may not be locked in as we think. So, could this apply to mass events too, like what we saw? Could human consciousness actually influence reality at a a collective level? Now, I know I'm asking a ton of questions, but stay with me on this because I want you to try something with me right now. Right now. Let's do a little thought experiment right now. I want you to visualize one of these events that just transpired. Let's take the Bourbon Street attack in New Orleans. Now imagine watching the news as many of us did. We're seeing the headlines, we're seeing the chaos and the impact Now, I want you to stop right there. Rewind that video in your mind. But this time I want you to rescript the event. So instead of seeing a mass casualty attack, imagine the barricades were in place. They weren't in the other version, but here you're going to imagine the barricades were in place. They were just installed on Bourbon Street a day or two before the New Year celebrations. Now the pickup truck rounds the corner, driven by this man at high speed, intending to mow down a crowd of people, only to find the barricades are in place. Now, days before, when he was surveilling the area preparing for the attack, the barricades weren't there. So he was caught off guard. So instead of a bunch of casualties and deaths, you just get a bunch of shocked onlookers. Ultimately, thank God no one is harmed. You just rewrote the script, y'all. You just rewrote the scene in your head. Now let's do one more. Let's take this horrible midair collision over DC. So instead of a deadly crash, let's imagine that the Black Hawk helicopter barely misses the jet. It tips under its belly, let's say, just in time. The news still covers it because that's dramatic, but the news covers it as a miraculous near miss rather than a disaster. So maybe you're asking, Alexis, why are you doing this? Here's why. I want you to think about this. Because the very idea that we're stuck in a single unchangeable timeline, it just may be an illusion. Some physicists argue that we do exist in a field of probabilities. And by shifting how we interact with reality, even in thought, we might be able to change its path, its trajectory. Now, before we move on, I want to add this side note, and this is important for me. And it kind of shocked me when I had the realization about the flight. One of the flight attendants who was lost in the American Airlines jet crash was based in Charlotte, North Carolina. His name was Ian Epstein. When I travel, I fly out of Charlotte. As many of you know, I have relocated to South Carolina, so I fly in and out of Charlotte, and I fly out of there a lot because, I travel a lot. So when I saw this man's photo on TV, I thought, oh my God, I've met him. I think more than once. I'm almost positive. If I'm not mistaken, he worked a couple of flights that I was on out to Los Angeles. And whether it was that flight or not, I fly out of Charlotte all the time. And I vividly recall his warmth and friendly personality. And we chatted, and I think he gave me free drinks, actually. And I remember that he helped the flight go by faster. I was kind of a crazy moment when I had that realization. So I'll say this, Ian, Godspeed, sir, and safe travel, safe passage. I know you'll be missed by a ton of people. Had to bring that up. Now, here's something else to consider before we close. Vedic astrologer Joni Patri, I think it's Patri is how she pronounces it. Do you know that name? Well, she recently spoke about Pluto and Mercury, who were in opposition on January 3rd, right at the beginning of the month, right? Also, right as these events started unfolding. Now, astrologers say Pluto rules destruction and rebirth, while Mercury is tied to mobility, travel, and technology. But when these two planets are in direct opposition, you get exactly what we saw. You get explosions. transportation disasters, sudden and unexpected destruction. So, question, was this energy perhaps influencing the events of January? Got to bring that up. But back to the idea that we may be able to alter past events. I know some of you may be thinking, Alexis, this is a stretch. Events already happened that have already happened. We can't change the past, can we? Here's my question. What if we can? What if just the awareness of patterns, our ability to recognize deeper meanings, our willingness to act on these insights may just give us the power to shift future events before they unfold? Because one thing's for sure, y'all, January 2025 was a warning. But what happens next? I think that's up to us. Now, I want to say it again. I absolutely, more than what, I need to hear from you on this. Do you believe these events were just random, or is there a deeper message? And if you do think there was a message, what do you think the message was or is? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one and respond to many of them. And if this video opened your eyes in any way, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to see this. Look, we need to make these the conversations that become the real breaking news. The universe is speaking, no, screaming at this point, and we have to start listening. Now, just a footnote before we close next week's episode. I'm so excited to have Billy Carson back on the show. I know that many of you probably know that Billy has been through a hell of a lot in the last several months, including some of the attacks he's been the target of. In addition to the fact that he nearly lost his life shortly before the attack started. It was like a string of things. This man's been through a lot. So Billy, I just talked to him yesterday, and he once again graciously accepted to come on the show to share not only some of what he's gone through. I don't want to harp on the drama as much, and the stuff that he's going to go into is going to be more in depth on his own. Get this, near-death experience that occurred during this near fatal bout of pneumonia where he nearly died. This will be the first time he'll go deep into that experience, by the way. He's touched on it before, but I don't think he's gone as deep. And I asked him, can we please dedicate some time to not only experience that you had that I would call a classic NDE with very atypical circumstances. I have a lot of questions there. I also want to know how it may have refined his ideas about the nature of reality. So this is an exclusive, y'all. So make sure you don't miss it. So you know what you got to do. You definitely want to subscribe to the channel for this and more, many more deep dives like this, because it's 2025. We're at the beginning and we're just getting started. Thanks as always. I'll check you next time right here on Higher Journeys. Thanks, everyone.